Well, you know, yesterday it was 84 and today it's 71 outside, and I feel like my AC didn't. My body's, yes. Well, my AC just didn't work last night.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Oh, he's taking care of this thing. Welcome, Executive Director John Garner. You may proceed. We are at your attention.
All right. Good morning, President Lewis, members of the board, and thank you for this opportunity to update you all on our efforts to update TriMet's Triennial DBE program goal. Next slide. So as a reminder, TriMet is required to oversee and implement federally required DBE program by legislative mandate that was passed in 1982. So as part of our program work, we work to ensure non-discrimination in the award of and administration of our DOT-assisted contracts. Our team works across our purchasing divisions to remove barriers from participation for DBEs on these DOT-assisted contracts, and we assist in the development of firms to actually compete and participate on those DOT contracts. Next slide. So every 3 years, TriMet is required to update and set targets for DBE utilization for these federal transportation dollar supported contracts. And we do that through the calculation of utilization on the availability of DBE firms, the potential spend of federal dollars on these projects, and the availability of other firms that could be used and connected and certified as disadvantaged business enterprises. We also adjust that based on our past participation. Next slide. Diving a little further and deeper into how we calculate that, we actually review sort of major projects that TriMet will be using federal funds for. We look at the potential scopes of those projects, and we do we review census data on the number of firms that could provide the work on those scopes, and then we look at the subset of DBE firms within those potential scopes. And again, we look at the actual availability of certified firms that are currently part of the project, but also small, veteran, minority, emerging businesses that could also potentially participate. And then we do a calculation based on our last 3 years of participation across our federal spend. And then we basically put all that together and we come up with a new average utilization recommendation that you'll see today. Next slide. So Here's an example of some of the projects we are forecasting that we'll be using federal spend for over the next 3 years. And the percentage you see is just the percentage of DBE firms that exist across the NAICS for the potential scopes for these projects. Now, this is not an exhaustive list of contracts, but these are some of the larger federally supported contracts we imagine using over the next 3 years. And you can get a sense of what that utilization could add up to for the FY 26, 27, and 28 years, which gives us our first base calculation of 10.8% or 10.88%. Next slide, please. We then go back and we look at what we actually achieved using all federal dollars for the last 3 program years. And we're talking about construction projects, but when we look at all federal dollars, it includes buying fuel, it includes buying services. But when it comes to utilization, we really do focus on sort of the infrastructure, which allows for the greatest utilization. Although these goals do apply to service contracts, uniform contracts, every time we do federal spend. Outside of a few very specific things that are not counted. So when you see this next step to this, so again, we use our last 3 years of participation, but then we forecast beyond DBE availability, and we look across small businesses, emerging small business, veteran disabled businesses, minority and women businesses, for firms that could be certified as a disadvantaged business to get us that total potential availability, and that's where you see that 20.58% number. These numbers are then brought together, and that gets us to an average of 15.51%, and that's what we'll be recommending TriMet pursue over the next few years in terms of DBE utilization. Next step. Next slide, please. So at the macro level, our conservative estimate of the total volume of federal spend is around $300 million over the next 3 years, and applying a 15.51% DBE utilization goal would essentially say about $47 million might be available to be spent on Department of Transportation funded projects. Next slide. One of the things I think continually surprises folks is when you look at those firms that receive the most federal dollars, DOT assisted dollars in the region, ODOT, the Port of Portland, and TriMet, we're the only race neutral contractor. So although we set goals, they're aspirational goals, and they're in accordance to the federal requirements that we're currently under. We're the most successful and have been for the last 20 years because of a suite of service provisions in terms of technical assistance, going very far out there to make sure all potential available firms know about our contracting standards, a series of trainings, really good strong policies and partnerships with our procurement division, and a lot of open houses that are TriMet specific about here's what's happening this fall or here's what's happening this spring. So a lot of firms actually know about the contracting opportunities within the agency. Next slide. As part of this effort to update and communicate the process, we've been doing a lot of outreach across. We've communicated to over 3,000 firms in the region. We've been doing a series of open houses, and right now we're still collecting feedback around just how folks feel about the goal, if there's any question. As part of your board packet or in terms of the board portal, you actually have a copy of the 8-page, a little bit more detailed methodology of how we actually came to that 15.5%. And there's a lot more detail in terms of the projects that we've either worked on in the past or what we forecast for the future if you want to go into greater detail. Next slide. In addition to our direct outreach and our direct mailings, staff have worked and reached out to a lot of the regional business chambers, specifically providing presentations at some of the minority and business association and chambers who are most deeply impacted by these goals. And so we're still collecting feedback, but I think we've gone through the AWAMIs and the NAMACs and the Latino Built and whatnot. But we feel really good, not just about what this goal allows us to do in terms of communicate the goal, but just circling back to these other chambers, especially the municipal chambers, to make sure that they and their partners are aware of all the contracting we do, well beyond the infrastructure, but certainly with the infrastructure and the service contracts. So we see this work plus this updated goal really positioning the agency in this next program year to really expand technical assistance to firms that have historically not done business with TriMet. Next slide. So normally this presentation would have been provided by Daphne, our manager of our business and contractor development program, but she is on a well-deserved vacation because she got all this in as we get ready to submit it in August. But hopefully in the next time you hear from the team, you'll get a chance to meet more of them. But that's a lot of information, probably quick as normal, but I'd love to answer any questions you might have.
Questions from the board? Just ask. Yeah, go ahead, Director Frisbee. Okay.
First, thank you for walking through this. I admit I had a moment of terror when I pulled up your memo and saw all the spreadsheets, and I was like, oh my God. But then it was actually laid out in a way that was very manageable. So apologies to my 6th grade math teacher, who's probably really sad to know that I feel a moment of shock when I look at a lot of numbers. But I wanted to get, I'm hoping to hear a little bit more from you. I think this concept of we are race neutral, which is legally required, or legally recommended.
Currently you can provide a race conscious program if you do a disparity study.
Yes.
And so
And we-
ODOT has race conscious and the port, and they've done very extensive availability studies. But I think there's a movement nationally to sort of move away from that, and we've been advising the port about steps they can take to sort of still achieve great outcomes, but be less potentially challengeable in court.
So that's what I was hoping you could just dive into a little bit deeper. And then I think one of the pieces that's really important for us to think about in that you've really helped me understand, and I want to flag, is this is also, there's a moral and a public good here, and there is also, it is stewarding our resources effectively when we think about the future, because if we are able to bring more competitors and more firms and more entities into the market and support them, we don't end up reliant on the same 3 folks 8 years, 10 years, 12 years down the road. We actually have a thriving marketplace. And so, but I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how we've navigated that balance of staying race neutral and supporting emerging entities in this work.
No, thank you. So I think one of the things, reputation goes a long way, right? And sort of the organizational values and how that's evidenced in terms of what we're actually achieving. So long before I got here, the road was paved by GMs and leadership around sort of what's the regional value. And I think the county and the city do a good job as well, but I think they're in a little bit more flexible position because their funds are different, right? And so I think what we're able to do is first provide guidance. So the good news, at least currently, is it's a federally required utilization goal. And so that's very clear to our partners, and it's always been, whether it was 10% 10 years ago or 12%, it's always been growing as the field of available contractors have been going. And so all we're doing is asking for essentially a representative sample of the firms that exist to sort of build that capacity. Now, once a contractor recognizes that we do have an aspirational goal, I think historically they've been trying to meet it. And we've never really pushed anyone beyond. You won't see us ask for 30% utilization, although we are part of conversations with other public municipal governments that are trying to get 20 and 25 and 30%. And we're trying to find some level of balance between realistic and growing the opportunities without sort of creating problems or penalties for firms who can't just meet that spirit of the work. And so I think the aspirational gets lost because once a contractor proposes the utilization, we do compliance around that goal. But it's not punitive. It really is more about how do we connect you to the firms that exist within this marketplace to help you achieve what you promised to achieve. One of the things the feds did last summer was they did create more expectation on the administrative side. So firms actually have to identify prime contractors actually identify firms they're planning to use or certainly planning to work and reach out to, and as part of good faith efforts. So it's very clear, I mean, the state certified contracting list, it's very clear who exists and what scopes they're available for. So and that's why our projects are aggregate. We don't look at one specific, like steel, for example, and say, you must achieve the utilization within this scope of work. We allow the contractors to use a recipe to mix up availability and utilization to get a balanced approach. And I think that's worked very well. And in my 9 years here, I've never heard a contractor complain that it's too hard to find certified firms in aggregate. There's a lot more opportunity on a lot larger projects, but one of the things we want to do in the next few years is build out capacity among smaller ongoing service purchasing opportunities.
Other questions for Director Garner? Executive Director Garner.
All right, easy peasy.
I have an awkward question.
Sure.
So what's the history, because I'm thinking there's gender neutral and then there's race neutral. How did that term come to be? I mean, is it used across the industry? Can you give a little bit more of, I know it's why it's being used, but were there other options, I guess, or
Well, I think there,
what's it
I
trying
think
to
the
achieve?
only two
Yeah.
options, so there's many certifications, there's
Yeah,
6 types of
okay.
certifications.
Yeah.
And I think basically when you go back to the last 25,
Mm-hmm.
back to 1982, the biggest disparities that folks found on terms of contracting were not, female, male. It was really white
Race.
and non-white.
Okay.
And so when the legislation was passed in the 80s, they had a lot of data showing that in these marketplaces, only majority firms were getting the majority of the work. And so fast forward, 10 years later, then they wanted to say, well, how do you actually, how can you manage and measure this? And so race neutral assumes that you can still achieve your goals without putting sort of racially specific. So the difference really between us is we only focus on disadvantaged business enterprises, where the port might focus on minority, disadvantaged, emerging women.
Okay.
Right? And the biggest difference is a race conscious program allows you to set a hard goal. And again, you can do that because if you do a disparity study that can prove in this marketplace, despite the availability of women and minority firms, they're not getting work. And back in 2000, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, as part of the Yellow Line Project, the board made a decision to focus on aspirational utilization. And I think the leadership at the time and the board at that time was really specific about, we want to see our projects reflect the communities in which we operate. And I think they had a lot of forward-thinking private sector partners who agreed. And so what started as a reputation was canonized later in the DBE program that allowed for race neutral as long as aspirational goals were set. And so we've been very lucky not to have to pursue race conscious, although years ago we considered it, but we feel like there's actually more opportunity to bring more partners into the fold through race neutral.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any more awkward questions?
Okay, seeing none. Well, thank you.
Thank you. And again, we'll be
Yes.
submitting this as under current requirements August 1st.
Okay, and just a reminder to the board, make sure you take the survey. You sent us the link.
That's right.
Might ask Felicia to send it out
Yes.
again to us so we can take the survey.
Right, because
Yes.
next month we'll be giving you a board briefing on our language access plan update and our Title VI program update.
Okay, thank you, Executive Director John Garner.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's get out of here.
Meeting's over. Thank you, everyone.
Wednesday.